Babies are wired for connection, and as early as 2 or 3 months, they experience powerful emotions, including intense anxiety. To manage this, they split good from bad, and later they learn how to integrate good and bad. Welcome to the Art of Therapy, Season 3, Episode 5, The World of Object Relations Theory.
It's good to be back here with you, and we really explore the art of therapy and just looking more and more and understanding a frame of reference of psychotherapy.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So just to recap, so the last time we really started to have a look at Anna Freud and just her amazing contributions to the field of understanding the ego, but then also with children and her work with children.
Yes.
And how she really looked at how children manage their anxiety through coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms. And just once we can understand that, how we can actually assist children to work through the anxiety and understand where's the place for defense mechanisms.
Yeah, she did the most remarkable work, and the way that she had understood really the importance of the ego and how independent it is, and how in working with children one needs to be so sensitive, understanding their ego functioning and being mindful of strengthening that before any further intensive work, and that applying to adults as well, utilization with trauma. So she really did the most remarkable work and began to bring psychotherapy into the present. And then working, of course, beautifully with children, her work with play therapy, observation, drawings, just amazing work.
It was really, it's amazing contribution in just understanding children, but also adults. It's you just understanding human nature.
Yes.
Yes. So I think just moving from Anna Freud, so starting to have a look at one of the other developments, which is of course object relations. And most psychotherapists somewhere in the journey, you've either heard about it or have really gone into depth about it. But that we start to explore that and to understand a bit more about object relations.
Yes, it's quite a mouthful. Object relations theory.
Yes.
So yes, let's explore it together.
Okay. So I think if we can just start with just first, so where does object relations come from? So just who pioneered it, and just where's the start of object relations theory?
Yes. So really, we know that a lot of work had been done in Vienna, and it had gone to other countries. But one of the benefits of a country that is perhaps further away or just geographic location is sometimes a country can bring with it, because of its distance, some new ideas, some additional contributions. And that's exactly what happened with object relations theory. It was the British Psychoanalysis Society that really began to look in earnest at the nature and quality of the caregiving relationship. And it was amazing because Anna Freud had really brought awareness around, as we've just looked at, ego functioning and how adaptive it is, and working in the here and now and working with children. And one of the developments that occurred in parallel and building on this was with Melanie Klein. And Melanie Klein was one of the psychoanalysts in the British Psychoanalyst Society. And what she now drew attention to was in working with children, because she too really began working with children very actively and began observing their play and working very meaningfully. And up until this time, much of the work in psychoanalysis was really around developing an understanding, developing insight. And we saw with both Freud and his contribution, and Jung, and then Anna herself, how once you can understand something, you can often get profound, and the individual and person gets profound relief. So insight had played a central role. But what we now see with Melanie Klein is she takes it beyond understanding and insight and begins to look at the nature and quality of the caregiving relationships. And having worked with children intensively and now looking at this, she really discovered something quite remarkable. And what it is that she discovered is she realized with very young children, just really infants, toddlers, but let's go just to infants now, that they experience the world in such a way where everything is extremely sensitive. And the infant learns, and it's a defense mechanism, actually learns to relate to the caregiver, mother, and any primary caregiver in terms of really an object. And that object is really it's a part object. So it's not, it's just part of that object. And what this enables the infant to do is manage very strong emotions, especially emotions of anxiety, fear. The infant effectively learns to split. And so the infant has an experience of, let's say, mother, and it's nurturing, warm. And so the infant identifies this as a good mother. If there was really meaningful feeding and very warm and safe, good breast or good mother. And then at other times, when there's not effective feeding or there's some difficulty perhaps, or mother's not there, just in this case, then the baby begins to represent or internalize this as bad breast or bad mother. So what the baby's actually doing is splitting good from bad. And this occurs in the first, say, 3 to 4 months. And it's an incredible defense mechanism, and moreover, an adaptive mechanism. Because if you can consider just, even as an adult, you can value someone, but there are going to be times where they would disappoint you, or you would be taken aback. And other times where you can be really surprised. It can be deeply meaningful. It's difficult for us to bring together that any one person can relate to us in ways that are both meaningful, fulfilling, and other times disappointing, or painful or frustrating. Wow, and we are adults.
Yes, yeah.
How does an infant do this? Where everything is so magnified, everything is so sensitized.
The world is actually so small that it's either good or bad.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And this was really quite a remarkable contribution to recognize that the infant, the baby, is actually managing the world in this way. And so, yes, this first few months, 3 to 4 months of the caregiver becomes absolutely essential. And Klein described this as a paranoid-schizoid position, where effectively the baby begins to see aspects of the environment as very hostile, and becomes and reacts to that hostility, hence the the paranoia, but it's not true paranoia. And then the schizoid is schizo-effectively splitting, but in the process splitting good from bad. And that split also protects the good. It creates safety. And in that process is now that split of good-bad is now internalized as an object.
Yeah, I think that it's actually amazing observations to be able to understand it like that. And that splitting is necessary at that age because it's actually a protective mechanism. It protects the baby from experiencing the good and all of the good and creating that safety by splitting the bad from that.
Yes. Yeah, because her work involved working very closely with children. So she, in her play, could see little infants expressing very strong emotion. And that's where she began to even consider that infants can express perhaps very strong emotions of rage, perhaps even jealousy, just strong emotions. And we don't usually think of infants in this way.
No.
But she began to conceptualize the rich emotional reactions that a baby or an infant has in the caregiving relationship. And how do they then internalize this or represent this? And so, yes, this first phase is this paranoid-schizoid phase. But then after that, what she explained and set out, and this can go anywhere up to 12 months, and that the infant now moves in another direction and begins to integrate these internalized objects, part objects, now begins to recognize that mom, for instance, is the same, the good mother, and is nurturing, and the baby feels very safe. And it's the same person where a baby can feel very frustrated or have some strong emotion. And so actually begins to integrate now from a part object to part whole. So actually beginning to see this as the person and their relationship with this person. And Klein went on to say that as they experience this, it's called the depressive position, not because they're depressed, but it's more they have to really psychologically, emotionally integrate what's happening. And this can come with some sense of guilt. If the infant has been reacting very, very strongly, because it's now the same person, and that could come with guilt. And Klein went on to say that as this process continues, there's also reparation, some way that the infant begins to make good or make better on some of those strong emotions. And that this process of integration is healthy and essential and carried into adulthood, because we carry these internalized objects, these representations into adulthood. And now that that adult is beginning to recognize that people have parts that are meaningful, other parts that are not, have impacts, expected, unexpected, that this is, people are not perfect. And part of this is also that desire to have deep empathy for others, and also work to create and relate meaningfully.
Psychotherapy is not only a profession, it's a state of being. And for that, it requires continuous learning, training, and refining your skills. If you would like to become better in your role as a psychotherapist, come and join Dr. Warwick Phipps for in-person training at Treatment Work Center, where you will experience training like never before from a thought leader and expert in psychotherapy. If you would like some more information on our training or to book a training session, please visit the link in the description. And also, if you find these podcast episodes meaningful, please subscribe to The Art of Therapy. I think it's actually it's beautiful with how she described it, and it's that it's going from an infant with your primary caregiver, where it's we take the example as a mother, where they need to split that first because they're not ready. They actually can't integrate that.
Yes.
But then as they grow older, that the infant can actually start to integrate it, but use it as the same object that is good and is bad, but in the same object.
Yes.
And that it actually becomes a skill. Because if you can do it with your primary caregiver, then it becomes easier to do it with other people and other relationships as well.
Yes, very much. Yeah, these skills, which really represent these representations, I suppose later on we've come to think of them as schemas, but this, and we'll explore it when we get to attachment theory, but they serve as kind of the first move towards some kind of blueprint. And these early caregiver interactions have an enormous impact on the infant. And how we understand them today is, yes, those are actually carried forward into adulthood, which is quite something. Just to think from those first early months to first year, what impact there can be in a caregiving relationship.
And it is, because most infants, they don't remember that.
No.
They don't have memory of that, but it's part of them.
Yes, that's the beauty of this, that what Klein had recognized is that much of this was unconscious. And why then with adults, one could experience being in a relationship and feeling clingy, or tending to push away, or tending to get into the same dance or difficulty. And what Klein had understood was that much of these patterns that come from early caregiving relationships are unconscious, but they get expressed.
Once you can understand that, you can actually work with a client in looking at it and making sense of it, and actually taking them on the journey in how to navigate that splitting and that integration then.
Yes, because this is the beauty of the psychoanalytic approach, is, and more broadly psychodynamic, is it helps once you can bring the unconscious into the conscious. But not only for just insight. What Klein was getting at was actually in therapy, finding ways to express that the client can express this and actually have a corrective in the here and now, because of course the client, if we're now working with the adult client, for instance, brings that unconscious experience of that early caregiver relationship, and through transference, and we've spoken about that, begins to relate to the therapist in terms of some of those unconscious processes that were learned in an early caregiving experience. But once it starts being expressed to the therapist can now start to manage that and give the client a new experience, which can be a remarkable thing.
It really then becomes therapy in the here and now, working through the childhood or the early years, actually.
Yes.
And having a different experience.
Yes, very much. So it's just it's just what's possible with this kind of thinking, and we can just see the contribution, the development, because we now move into working with children directly in the here and now, understanding some of these unconscious processes, but ones that relate to their early and first caregiving experiences, and giving them a corrective emotional experience, or that adult a corrective emotional experience. So, wow, what a development. So, yes, this was really the beginning of object relations. Then adding on to that, we've got W.R.D. Fairbairn. And what he was really doing is he looked at Freud's work and just reconsidered the libido. We saw that Jung had said that it was much more than sexual. It was a general psychic energy. for individuation, for integration and transcendence of the individual. And so what he looked at here said, well, yes, very much, but let's take this even further, that libido is actually, a very big part of that is actually connection seeking. We're actually wired for connection, for relating. So not only managing some of those impulses and drives sexually or sexuality, hunger, aggression, but also we're actually wired for relationship. We're wired for connection.
You know, we're seeking that connection, and we're seeking out that attachment.
Yes, yes, very much. So we're actually, in a sense, when we refer to object relations, yes, these objects are just representations, but what these relate to is relationships. So we see here psychotherapy, relationship proper, the nature and quality of the relationship. And of course, following this work, we would get Donald Winnicott. And he also did some remarkable work where, in a really positive way, he began to consider what kind of early caregiving experiences really make the difference. And what he showed us was that really when a mother's, but it's any caregiver, but let's just say a mother is really nurturing, not perfect, but nurturing, this sort of an instinctual empathy, just being there, that this relationship and the quality of that caregiving relationship enables the baby to have really this secure base, the secure place. We're going to come back to that because it emerges in much of other work. But the key thing here is what he was getting at is when there was empathy and this nurturing, that the baby, infant and the growing baby actually can become their true self. When that early caregiving is, if there's parts of it that really impact on the child and there's more intensive splitting, what Winnicott indicated was that will have the baby an infant can't be more of their true self. They start relating in a way which is really a defensive self, artificial, where they're trying to manage things, but they cannot be their true self, as it were. And so he showed us the importance of these early caregiving relationships and what that can mean for the infant.
He showed it beautifully that again it goes back to your first experiences with your primary caregivers. You know, if there's a secure space, babies can explore and come back and have that safety, and have their true self expressed. And with the false self, when there's been impact, it also becomes difficult because they almost have to hide a part of their true self because the relationship is necessary there.
Yeah, that's so important what you've noted, because there would be other developments that we'll explore if we can at a later stage, but understanding how this would then relate into adult difficulties, issues around narcissism or borderline personality organizations, because the individual is trying to manage these splits, as it were, which can't be expressed, these internalized bad objects, which unable or not free to express. So it really can have profound implications.
And once we can understand that again, then we can really assist the client, because the therapeutic relationship is again in the here and now.
Yes.
So we can assist in working with the client through that.
Yes, very much. Yeah, this is why I just noted earlier, it's the beginning of relationship proper in psychotherapy, because we now see that insight and understanding has a really important part. And to add to that, it's the experience of being in a relationship, and that early caregiving relationship is just so important, and what that can mean for an infant's or baby's development. But the beauty of this as well, once you begin to understand, is even if there have been impacts, adverse effects in that caregiving, what the object relations theory approach shows us is these can be worked with in therapy. These unconscious processes and experiences of relationship can be brought into awareness, and with both insight and corrective emotional experience, change them, which means that as adults we can relate in new ways, in the way we relate romantically, the way we work with colleagues.
It's empowerment. Once we understand it, we can do something with it.
Yes.
And it's not just because there was maybe adverse effects initially, it doesn't mean that it should remain like that. That's where the place of object relations is. So understanding it and then having a corrective experience,
Yes,
which helps us to relate differently.
very much. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds with object relations, it really is complex, and there's so much to understand, but it's so empowering actually to understand it, and that there's a great deal of work that can be done with that. And it just, the more we talk about object relations, it reminds me of the attachment theory, and you also said that it's part of it is the attachment, well, not part of it, but it touches on attachment theory.
Yes.
And it's important to look at that as well.
This is so important, because once the spotlight now shifted to now include the early caregiving relationship, of course, it would now move from not only the experience of the infant, but now being able to look at the nature and quality, perhaps more objectively, about those caregiving patterns and how the infant or the baby responds. And that is so exciting, because once you begin to be able to describe some of these patterns of bonding, wow. And so, yes, that takes us right into the world of attachment theory, which is so prominent today. Very exciting approach.
Yes, yes. So maybe we can pause with that, and then go with the object relations, and then the next episode we can really start to have a look at attachment theory.
Right, we pick it up next time.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for joining us on The Art of Therapy. If you found this episode meaningful, or if it expanded your knowledge, we would love to hear from you in the comments section. We are looking forward to continuing this journey with you. Until our next episode.